The message came through while I was assisting shoppers at my store. I'm departing for Miami with my 20-year-old partner. The joint account has been cleared already, LOL. My fingers remained steady reading those words. My tone stayed even helping Mrs. Peterson select a wrap. The sole indication that my spouse of 12 years had just demolished our union through text was a subtle tension near my temples. I waited for Mrs. Peterson's departure. Her item enclosed in our distinctive silver packaging before composing my reply. Best wishes. My name is Claire, age 38, recipient of history's most heartless farewell. Yet while Mark likely celebrated his dramatic departure, picturing me devastated by his treachery, I was methodically securing my boutique's entrance. The warnings had existed for months. The extended work evenings that never aligned with his salary deposits, the abrupt passcode modifications on his device, his newfound religious gym attendance, purchasing fresh clothing, attempting to reclaim his youth. 3 months prior, I discovered a bill for a 2-person meal at an upscale establishment on an evening he'd reported working overtime. That identical night, I'd established a separate banking account at another institution. 7 days later, when he suggested merging our accounts for simplification, I'd consented pleasantly while transferring my personal funds to the fresh account. The shared account he'd just drained, it held precisely enough to prevent his suspicion, approximately 60 days of standard deposits. The remainder was securely protected, alongside comprehensive documentation of every questionable transaction he'd conducted throughout the previous year. My device vibrated again. Don't waste time pleading. Melissa and I depart tomorrow. I'll arrange for my belongings later. Melissa, the fresh receptionist at his workplace. I'd encountered her at the corporate Christmas gathering, observed her laughing excessively at Mark's remarks, noticed her touching his shoulder when she believed nobody was watching. She possessed youth sufficient to be his child, innocence adequate to believe she was unique. I didn't acknowledge his message. Instead, I contacted my attorney, the one I'd consulted 60 days earlier when I'd located the lodging expenses on our credit statement. It's moment, I stated simply. He just executed his action. The documents are prepared, she responded. I'll submit them first thing tomorrow. Would you like me to arrange service in Miami? No urgency. Allow him to believe he's victorious first. Another message from Mark. I realize this must be difficult for you. You're not becoming any younger after all. At least you possess your modest store to occupy you. My modest store. The thriving boutique I'd constructed from nothing. The one generating greater revenue than his middle management role. The one whose earnings I'd deliberately maintained separate from our shared finances. I smiled, considering the certified correspondence that would await him in Miami. Allow him his moment of victory. I occupied that evening in our residence, my residence since I'd inherited it from my grandmother, and maintained it under my name despite Mark's persistent suggestions to include him on the title. Another fortunate intuition that had proven beneficial. While arranging the documentation my attorney would require, I discovered our wedding collection. Mark appeared so different then. Before his midlife emergency had transformed him into a parody of his previous self. Recently, he wore garments too constricting for his softening midsection, tried excessively to relate with the 20-somethings at his workplace, used terminology that sounded absurd coming from a 45-year-old man. My device continued vibrating with messages from him, each one more patronizing than the previous. I've been arranging this for months. Melissa comprehends me in manners you never managed. You'll be fine. Perhaps you'll discover someone closer to your own age. Already informed my family, they concur we drifted apart. It's nobody's responsibility, really. I captured each message, adding them to my proof collection. Allow him to excavate his pit deeper. My attorney would appreciate his casual acknowledgement of premeditation, his cheerful declaration about draining our account. The final message captured my focus. BTW, I utilized the joint card to reserve our flights and hotel. Consider it my farewell present, LOL. Perfect. I contacted the credit card corporation. Mrs. Harrison speaking. I need to document fraudulent expenses and terminate a card immediately. Certainly, ma'am. Can you identify the expenses? 2 first-class tickets to Miami, reserved today. Hotel expenses at the Royal Palm, and I'll need to eliminate my spouse as an authorized user. Do you possess documentation of the fraud? Text messages from my spouse admitting he utilized our joint card to reserve travel with his partner after draining our banking account. I'll be pleased to forward them. The representative's professional manner couldn't entirely conceal her satisfaction as she terminated the expenses. Mark and Melissa would reach the airport tomorrow discovering their tickets invalidated. Their hotel arrangement terminated. My device vibrated again. Don't concern yourself about the residence. I'll permit you to remain there until you locate something smaller. I actually produced audible laughter at that one. Did he genuinely believe he possessed any claim to my grandmother's residence? Had his self-importance expanded so extensively that he'd forgotten whose name appeared on the title? Another vibration. And I understand the store matters greatly to you. We can arrange a reasonable payment for your portion, my portion of my enterprise, that I'd constructed myself, financed myself, expanded myself while he complained about my extended hours and labeled it my pastime. I served a glass of wine, the quality selection I'd been reserving for a significant occasion. This qualified. Tomorrow, Mark would discover some harsh realities about property regulations and separate holdings. But tonight, I'd appreciate the silence and design my subsequent chapter. Morning delivered a succession of progressively furious messages from Mark. What the heck did you execute to our credit card? The airline won't recognize our tickets. The hotel terminated our arrangement. Respond to me. I muted my device and proceeded to my boutique. Friday was consistently our most active day, and I possessed a fresh shipment of designer handbags to process. Existence continues, even when your spouse absconds with a receptionist young enough to be his child. Around midday, his mother contacted. Claire, dear, Mark informed us everything about how domineering you've been, how you drove him away. He claims you're being spiteful now, creating problems with his travel arrangements. I placed her on speaker while I organized a window presentation. Did he reference draining our joint account and charging tickets for himself and his partner on our credit card? Silence. Then, well, he stated you left him no option, that you'd been frigid and distant. Barbara, I possess his messages. Would you prefer me to recite them to you? The one where he boasted about taking our funds? Or perhaps the one where he ridiculed my age? Another pause. He did appear somewhat harsh. I informed him that text message was inappropriate. I value the contact, Barbara. I've consistently respected you, but I believe it's optimal if we conclude this conversation now. My attorney has recommended minimal interaction with Mark's family during the proceedings. Proceedings? Already? Farewell, Barbara. By late afternoon, Mark's sister Amanda was circulating family rumors through shared acquaintances. Apparently, Mark and Melissa were stranded at a budget motel near the airport. Their Miami aspirations temporarily obstructed. He'd attempted using his personal credit cards, but those had been maximized for months. Another warning sign I'd observed. My attorney contacted with an update. The emergency session is scheduled for Monday, given his acknowledgement of draining the joint account and the documented credit card fraud. We're in a powerful position to freeze all remaining holdings. Has he been served yet? Not yet, but he'll receive the documents at his new motel location. Speaking of which, his partner's social media is supplying excellent proof. She's been publishing about their adventure all day, including some select comments about you. I smiled, considering my own documentation, a year's worth of questionable expenses, hotel bills, text messages that proved premeditation. Mark had been so concentrated on his grand departure that he'd never considered I might be observing, waiting, preparing. My device vibrated with another message. You believe you're so clever, but I created copies of all the boutique's financial documentation. Half that enterprise is mine. I forwarded the message to my attorney, including it to the expanding file of Mark's errors. Allow him to discover the difficult way about separate holdings and enterprise ownership. Sometimes the optimal revenge is simply being prepared. The emergency session on Monday was everything I could have anticipated. Mark appeared in his new youthful wardrobe, designer jeans too constricting for his age, a blazer that proclaimed midlife emergency. Melissa waited outside, her youth painfully evident under the severe courthouse illumination. My attorney presented our proof methodically. Mark's cheerful message about draining our account, his credit card fraud, his documented history of concealed expenses, each piece deliberately collected over months of quiet observation. Your Honor, Mark's hastily contracted attorney attempted. My client acknowledges some impulsive decisions, but Mrs. Harrison's actions have been spiteful and calculating. Calculating, my attorney responded. You mean prudent? My client secured her separate holdings and maintained comprehensive documentation of her spouse's questionable behavior. That's not spiteful. That's intelligent business. The judge examined my documentation. The separate property title to the residence, the boutique's corporation documents in my name exclusively, the deliberate separation of enterprise and personal finances that Mark had consistently complained about. Mr. Harrison, the judge addressed Mark directly. You acknowledged via text message to intentionally draining a joint account and utilizing shared credit cards to finance a trip with your partner. Do you dispute this? Mark shifted awkwardly. I was just attempting to make a clean separation. By committing financial fraud, the judge elevated an eyebrow. And now you're asserting rights to property that documentation demonstrates is clearly separate from marital holdings. The enterprise expanded during our union. Mark's attorney attempted again. My client is entitled to. The enterprise was established before the union. My attorney interrupted, and Mrs. Harrison maintained strict separation of enterprise and personal finances throughout. We possess documentation of every cent invested and earned. I observed Mark's expression as reality started penetrating. He believed this would be simple. Drain our accounts, abscond with his partner, perhaps claim half my enterprise in the divorce. He'd never troubled to comprehend my insistence on maintaining things separate, had ridiculed my deliberate bookkeeping as obsessive. The court discovers sufficient proof of financial misconduct, the judge declared. All shared holdings are frozen pending final dissolution. Mr. Harrison is ordered to restore any funds removed from joint accounts within 24 hours. But that money's gone, Mark objected. We expended it on. Then I recommend you discover a method to replace it, the judge interrupted him. And Mr. Harrison, the court takes a very dim perspective of utilizing shared credit cards to finance adventures with paramours. Outside the courthouse, I heard Melissa questioning Mark about their Miami arrangements. His response was lost in the sound of my heels clicking confidently across the marble surface, heading back to the enterprise he'd never comprehended or respected. The subsequent few weeks delivered a sequence of progressively desperate actions from Mark. He attempted asserting the boutique had been his concept. He recalled investing funds in its early days. He even proposed he'd been my enterprise partner throughout. Assertions quickly disproven by my meticulous documentation. He's becoming desperate, my attorney observed. His partner's social media demonstrates they're residing at her studio apartment now. Apparently existing on a receptionist's salary isn't quite the glamorous departure he envisioned. Mark's family started reaching out, their manner markedly different from their initial accusations. We had no awareness, his sister Amanda acknowledged. He informed us you'd been frigid, domineering that he needed to depart. But then we observed his messages, the manner he boasted about taking your funds. That's not the brother I believed I knew. His mother contacted again, this time in tears. The things he stated about your age, about replacing you with someone younger. I raised him superior than that. I believed I did anyway. I allowed their contacts to reach voicemail. Their support might have signified something weeks prior, but now it felt like rats abandoning a sinking vessel. The boutique flourished, ironically enhanced by local rumors about my situation. Women started visiting specifically to demonstrate support, often departing with far more than they'd intended to purchase. My former spouse attempted something similar. One customer confided while purchasing a designer handbag. Believed he'd take everything in the divorce? Men like that never anticipate us to be more intelligent than them. My device still vibrated occasionally with messages from Mark, his manner oscillating between fury and manipulation. "You've destroyed everything. I never intended to harm you. You'll regret being so spiteful. Can't we arrange something? That enterprise would be nothing without my support." I forwarded each message to my attorney without responding. Allow him to excavate his pit deeper. Through the grapevine, I heard Melissa was experiencing second thoughts. Apparently, sharing her studio apartment with a middle-aged man who couldn't afford his own location wasn't the romantic adventure she'd envisioned. The age difference that had seemed thrilling during secret hotel encounters felt different in the harsh illumination of reality. She published about toxic relationships and learning from errors yesterday, my attorney mentioned during an update contact, and eliminated her relationship status this morning. I almost felt sympathy for Mark, almost. But then I recalled his haha after informing me he'd drained our account. The casual brutality of his comments about my age. The manner he'd assumed I'd be powerless without him. Instead of sympathy, I felt something else. Pride. Pride in my foresight, in my quiet fortitude, in my capability to secure myself while he underestimated me. The final divorce session painted a very different picture from Mark's envisioned victory. Gone was his arrogant attitude, replaced by barely hidden panic. Melissa was noticeably absent. She'd progressed to a co-worker, her own age, according to workplace rumors. Mark had appeared in his old garments, the designer wardrobe apparently returned to help reimburse the joint account he'd drained. His attorney looked exhausted, probably from attempting to discover loopholes in my documented separation of holdings. "Your Honor," Mark's attorney attempted one final time. Despite the separate property documentation, my client contributed to the expansion of his wife's enterprise through moral support and moral support, my attorney interrupted. Like these text messages belittling Mrs. Harrison's enterprise as a modest store, or these social media publications labeling it her pastime, the judge had clearly observed enough. The final settlement reflected my deliberate planning. I maintained my residence, my enterprise, and my separate holdings. Mark received his personal possessions and his automobile, which was valued less than he owed on it. "You've destroyed me," he hissed as we departed the courthouse. "I'll have to relocate back with my parents." "No, Mark, you destroyed yourself. I just ensured you couldn't destroy me, too." His mother was waiting outside, ready to transport him to her residence, his new home at 45. The irony of his situation wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd ridiculed my age was now residing in his childhood bedroom while I continued operating my successful enterprise. "You arranged this throughout," he accused. "You knew this would occur." "No, I just paid attention, and unlike you, I comprehended the value of maintaining good documentation." His mother stepped between us. "That's sufficient, Mark. You've embarrassed yourself sufficiently already." As they departed, I heard her start in on him. "Honestly, what were you contemplating? 20-year-old, draining banking accounts, transmitting those horrible messages?" I observed them disappear into the parking area, experiencing nothing but relief. Mark had believed he was composing the conclusion to our narrative with that cruel message. Instead, he'd merely set my deliberately laid arrangements in motion. My device vibrated, not with messages from Mark this time, but with notifications of fresh orders from my boutique's website. Existence was advancing forward, just not in the direction he'd envisioned. Part 3, Segment 1, 600 words. 6 months after the divorce was concluded, my boutique had expanded to a second location. The irony wasn't lost on me, while Mark struggled to reconstruct his existence. The modest store he'd dismissed was flourishing. I'd employed 3 fresh employees and launched an online store that was gaining momentum nationally. Information of Mark's situation trickled back through shared acquaintances. He'd attempted dating applications, but discovered women his age weren't interested in a middle-aged man residing with his parents. Younger women, having heard about his history through workplace rumors, steered clear. Melissa had apparently warned her acquaintances about him, sharing screenshots of his desperate attempts to reclaim her after she'd departed. His career suffered too. The corporation's HR department had launched an investigation into his relationship with a subordinate, resulting in a formal reprimand. The advancement he'd been anticipating went to someone else, someone who didn't possess a history of inappropriate relationships with reception personnel. He attempted to assert age discrimination, Amanda informed me during an unexpected visit to the boutique. Stated they were punishing him for dating someone younger. HR just included that complaint to his file. I was surprised to observe his sister in my store, but her presence spoke volumes about how thoroughly Mark had alienated his own family. I realize we didn't support you initially, she acknowledged, running her fingers over a silk wrap. He performed the victim so well, but observing how he handled everything, how he acted afterward. I'm ashamed we ever believed him. My attorney maintained me updated on Mark's continued attempts to challenge the divorce settlement. Each petition was denied. His assertions of unfair distribution dismissed, based on the proof of his own actions. He actually attempted arguing that his message about draining the account was just a joke, she informed me, laughing. The judge questioned if, haha, made theft less illegal. The boutique's success delivered unexpected validation. Local enterprise magazines wanted to feature my narrative, not as a scorned wife, but as a savvy enterprise woman who'd secured her interests. Young entrepreneurs requested advice about maintaining enterprise and personal finances separate. The optimal protection is preparation. I informed one young woman who reminded me of Melissa and consistently trust your intuitions. Mark's mother contacted occasionally, usually after he'd executed something particularly self-destructive. He'd attempted online gambling, hoping for a quick solution to his financial problems. He'd gotten involved with a pyramid scheme that promised fast returns. Each attempt to recover his former lifestyle just excavated him deeper into trouble. I don't understand where we went wrong with him, she sighed during one contact. His father and I offered to assist him return on his feet if he'd just take responsibility for his actions. But he's still blaming everyone else. You, Melissa, his corporation, the judge. I listened politely, but maintained my distance. Their family drama wasn't my problem anymore. My existence had advanced forward, filled with arrangements for a third boutique location and a possible expansion to luxury accessories. The sole reminder of Mark's impact on my existence was a framed screenshot hanging in my office, his final message before I blocked his number. Have fun with your modest store. At least it'll occupy you in your old age. Below it sat my latest enterprise award. Proof that sometimes the optimal revenge is simply succeeding on your own terms. 1 year after the divorce, I hosted a grand opening for my third boutique location. The occasion attracted local media, and the narrative they wanted to tell wasn't about my failed union. It was about a successful enterprise woman expanding her brand. Mark's treachery had become a mere footnote in my success narrative. During the occasion, Melissa unexpectedly entered in. She appeared younger than ever, or perhaps I just felt that much stronger. She shifted awkwardly, clutching her purse like a shield. I owe you an apology, she stated quietly. I believed everything he informed me about how you were frigid, domineering, how you didn't support his aspirations. Then I observed him attempt the same manipulation tactics on me when things got difficult. I continued organizing a presentation of designer sunglasses. Those weren't his aspirations, Melissa. They were departures. There's a distinction. I recognize that now. She paused, then included. He attempted to relocate in when you froze the accounts. Believed my studio apartment would be temporary. After 14 days of him complaining about the dimensions of my closet and proposing I take out a loan for a bigger location, I comprehended what you meant about the distinction between aspirations and departures. I actually laughed at that. Allow me to guess. He possessed big arrangements but no method to finance them? Exactly. Everything was going to resolve once his investments paid off. Once he received that advancement. Once his cryptocurrency definitely increased in value. She shook her head. I'm dating someone my own age now. We possess student loans and a small apartment, but at least we're constructing something real. After she departed, my assistant manager whispered, "Was that the partner?" "No," I responded. "That was just another woman who discovered the same lesson I did." Speaking of lessons, I gestured to a young couple examining our designer handbags. Let's discuss your concept for expanding our accessories line. The boutique had become more than just an enterprise. It was a symbol of independence, of resilience, of the power of preparation. Young entrepreneurs often sought my advice, and I consistently emphasized the importance of securing their holdings. Mark's mother contacted one final time, not to discuss Mark, but to thank me. You taught our family an important lesson, she stated, about enabling bad behavior, about creating excuses for brutality. Mark's still residing at home, still blaming everyone else for his problems, but we're not defending him anymore. That's your legacy to our family, demonstrating us the distinction between supporting someone and enabling them. I contemplated that legacy as I examined arrangements for a fourth location. Mark had intended to diminish me, to exchange me in for a younger model and take half of everything I'd constructed. Instead, he'd inadvertently pushed me to become even stronger, more successful. My device vibrated with a message from my attorney. Mark submitted another petition to revisit the settlement. Judge dismissed it immediately and ordered him to compensate court costs. Believed you'd appreciate that. I smiled, considering him in his childhood bedroom, still attempting to rewrite a conclusion that had been determined the moment he underestimated me. Sometimes the optimal revenge isn't about getting even, it's about getting superior. 2 years after Mark's cruel text message, I received an invitation to speak at a women's enterprise conference. The topic wasn't divorce or treachery, it was about constructing and securing a successful enterprise. My narrative had evolved from cautionary tale to inspiration. During the Q&A session, a woman questioned about maintaining enterprise and personal finances separate. My spouse states I'm being paranoid. That union means sharing everything. My former spouse stated the same thing, I responded, right up until he attempted to assert half my enterprise in our divorce. Trust your intuitions. Protection isn't paranoia. The boutique chain had expanded to 5 locations, each more successful than the previous. The modest store Mark had ridiculed now employed 30 people, and had been featured in several national magazines. Through shared acquaintances, I heard Mark had finally relocated out of his parents' residence into a small apartment above a garage. He'd had to take a lower compensating position after his former corporation downsized, eliminating his role during restructuring. His dating profile still listed him as youthful at heart, though his profile photograph was clearly outdated. Melissa, ironically, had become a regular customer at my original boutique location. She'd earned her enterprise degree and started her own social media consulting corporation. You inspired me, she informed me once, demonstrating how a woman can construct something lasting instead of falling for empty promises. I maintained Mark's cruel text message framed in my office, not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of how far I'd advanced. Below, it hung a sign that read, "Success is the optimal revenge." At the 5-year anniversary celebration of my original boutique, I stood addressing my employees and loyal customers. The space had been transformed from a single modest store into the flagship store of a flourishing enterprise empire. Mark's mother attended, though I hadn't transmitted her an invitation. She waited until the crowd thinned to approach me. I observed Mark yesterday, she stated, smoothing her designer dress, which she'd purchased from my store. He was discussing his glory days, about the existence he could have possessed. He still doesn't comprehend that he didn't lose everything in the divorce. He threw it away. I contemplated that text message, his casual brutality, his assumption that I would crumble without him, how he'd anticipated me to beg, to break, to prove him right about my desperation. Instead, I'd constructed something stronger than before. Each new boutique location was a testament to what women could achieve when they stopped dimming their illumination for insecure men. The young saleswoman I'd employed last month, coincidentally also named Melissa, came over with a question about the fresh inventory system I'd implemented. As I explained the process, I captured a glimpse of my reflection in the store window. I observed what Mark had failed to observe 5 years prior. Not a woman becoming older, but one becoming wiser, stronger, more successful. His cruel text message had meant to be a conclusion. Instead, it had been a beginning, not just for me, but for every woman who heard my narrative and realized she deserved superior than someone else's midlife emergency.